Okay, today we are looking at understanding the wisdom of God, tapping into omnipresent intelligence. It's kind of interesting when we read the first chapter of Genesis that the first thing that God created was light. And of course, we understand this is coming from the ancient Hebrew perspective. But what's interesting about this is the light was created on the first day, and it was not until the fourth day that the sun and the moon were created. So the light that is being referenced here is not the light of the sun. And what is it? We can only speculate, but what we normally think of in terms of a metaphysical interpretation of this passage is light represents intelligence. And the ancient Hebrew was simply saying that before anything else was created, there was intelligence. And we associate we associate light with intelligence. You've seen the picture of the person with the light bulb above their head. That means somebody's come up with an idea, which can be scary to some of us. But it just represents, light has always represented intelligence. And Jesus said, "Let your light shine." That you're the light of the world. It's not speaking of physical light like we normally think of. It's something else at a deeper level. So we pray for guidance. When we pray for guidance, we may envision God imparting special wisdom that will help us resolve a specific issue in our life. It is good to remind ourselves that one of the qualities of God is intelligence. To express more intelligence, we affirm it. Affirming brings to our attention the truth that the fullness of divine intelligence is already present and now directing our every action. So to affirm that divine intelligence is now expressing, working through me, is not to kickstart it. It's not to say intelligence was not working through me a few moments ago. Affirmation reminds us. It brings our thinking back into alignment with that light is already here. The full light of intelligence is already present. And the way that I align myself with it is to, instead of say something like, "I don't know what to do now about this situation," to say the intelligence of God is now expressing through me at this moment. We're aligning ourselves with what is true. The divine intelligence is not something we create, not something we initiate, something that's already happening. And intelligence is one of the four aspects of God that I talk about all the time: life, love, power, and intelligence. And I like this idea, this theme. I was listening to an astronomer talking about looking for intelligent life on other planets and what it might look like and all of that, and how they go about the search and how they examine the evidence they get from Mars or the moon or whatever to see if they have found any evidence of intelligence. And what they're always looking for are molecules or something associated with the physical world, a vehicle through which intelligence would express. And since they don't find that, they say, well, there must not be any intelligence. And again, that would be like looking, we've all seen the Earth rise, the photograph of the Earth taken from space and how it's surrounded by blackness. But in that blackness there is light. There's just as much light in the blackness as there is that is reflecting off the planet Earth or off the moon. Same thing. We look up at the moon, it's surrounded by blackness. But the truth is, the light is every place, it's everywhere, and just because there's nothing that light can bounce off of, or no organism that light can shine through and let us see, doesn't mean that there isn't intelligence. It's the same with life. When science talks about life, is there life on other planets, they're always talking about a physical vehicle. Is there a physical vehicle that is expressing life? And we say, so far we haven't found anything. But is there life on other planets? If we accept that God is life and God is omnipresent, then we would have to conclude that there's no place where life is not. Life is every place. But it doesn't mean there is a vehicle through which that life or that light, that intelligence can express itself. I've given the illustration before. If you would take say a plastic bowl in the middle of winter, put it out in your yard and where everything is dead, and bring it up the temperature enough, the life that's there would start growing, because you would create an environment, a greenhouse type of environment, that would allow that to come forth. It's there even in the dead of winter, but it doesn't have a vehicle that can operate in an environment that is below freezing. In some cases, that life, every place on this planet there is life. There's some kind of expression of life. And that's why science associates life with the physical body. But they're not understanding or not admitting or not thinking in terms of life is an energy. Intelligence is an energy. When we talk about different levels of intelligence, expressing through different animals and through human beings and so forth, everything that we see has a brain, and that brain operates probably very much like a camera aperture. That some brains allow more intelligence to come through, some less. But it doesn't mean that intelligence itself is more or less present. It's present everywhere equally at the same time. And so if we think about that, and we're sitting in some problem in life saying, I don't know what to do about this. And that's a very normal reaction that we all have. I don't know what to do about this because I don't see the answer that would solve this particular issue. We're basically, in our thinking, we're saying intelligence has suddenly dropped. It's less present. But if we will think about even the ancient Hebrews' idea that, there is light, there is intelligence, and then we remind ourselves of that, and we say that infinite intelligence is tapping at the door of my brain, of my consciousness, revealing to me the right thing to do, the proper action to take, or whatever. It's a very interesting way to approach it, and it helps because we tend to get frantic when we're looking for an answer. We tend to push the river, tend to push the circumstances, try to make things different from what they are. And we may not understand how our answer is unfolding. And we'll get to that in just a moment. But I've been listening to and reading a couple of, and you might find this strange, but they're absolute atheists. But they are scholars. And they are explaining why, in their thinking, Jesus did not exist, and the Bible is complete fiction. The Gospels are complete fiction. And the reason I like to look at people like this is because if they're good scholars, they have done the research, and these two that I have looked at have done that. They start out with the idea there is no God and the Bible's a myth. Jesus didn't exist. That's what they start out with to prove. And so they do all of this research. They go through history, and I'm very familiar with a lot of the things they talk about. But they start out with the conclusion that there is no God and this Bible stuff is a myth. Well, I would agree with them up to a point, but what they are not grasping, what they never talk about, is the possibility of this invisible presence. They're thinking probably of the old man up in the sky when they say there is no God. I say there is no God like that as well. But I'm not an atheist. I just have a different understanding, as I'm sure you do too, of that, different from that particular perspective. And I don't believe everything that's in the Bible. I don't believe that it was intended to be taken literally, although it was intended to be taken literally, but we can't take it literally because we know more about how the universe came about now than we ever have. And we know that the Gospels and things like that are not, we don't take them at face value necessarily. They are a presentation of writers who had a certain agenda. And we don't necessarily have to embrace that certain agenda. But we do look at their works and appreciate it for what it is. And what the atheist never does is looks for the kernel of truth that may be behind why this stuff is written, why this stuff came out. That maybe the Jesus that the gospel writers talk about, maybe that is their invention. I don't have any trouble seeing that. But why did they talk about him in the first place? That's the question I have, and I think there is an answer to that, and that is he was a person who had tapped into this universal truth. He called it the Father. And so there is a reality beneath things that we, may not agree with. So if we're interested in going back to that level of life, because all of us probably have had questions about our religious upbringing. I hope we have. And maybe we have doubted it. Maybe we have, I can read some of these atheist materials, very convincing. They do a very good job. The two I've been reading do a very good job, but they're also very arrogant. It's like, I've got you. I have all this great wisdom from as a result of my college degree or whatever, and I'm a lot smarter than everybody else, and I figured this thing out. And there's they're accompanied by an arrogance that I do not appreciate at all. But I appreciate their research because a lot of it is valid. But they're trying to prove that something is not true that a whole line of thinkers believe is, and know is, accept is. There's no doubt in my mind that there's this thing we call God. It's just not an old man in the sky. So what is it that says I have to accept that there is a God that is an old man in the sky, or that Jesus died for my sins? Does that mean I discount Jesus? Absolutely not. But I'm asking more questions about who is this man, and I want to know. So I will say, let there be light, let there be intelligence. Show me, guide me on how to think of this man. What was it about him that caused him to stand out, that caused people to follow him? And I think it's very possible that the later followers completely misinterpreted what he taught and what he represented. But that doesn't discount who he might have been or who he probably was. And that is a valid question to ask. He may not be who they say he was, but who was he? And I always come back to this infinite intelligence, this one presence and one power. This was a man that apparently tapped into that and talked about it, but he has much difficulty explaining it to the people in his day as we do today. The majority of people do not approach the spiritual life in that way. They want something they can cling to, something they can hang their hat on. Like the little girl said, I need a God with skin on. So that's the majority. And that's why I believe that the apostles switched, as I have said many times, switched from a mystical teaching of Jesus to an evangelical teaching that people were used to hearing. the kingdom of God is coming. But we're going to revamp that a little bit and make Jesus the one that's going to usher it in. But there's this, I always come back to this, infinite wisdom, infinite intelligence is behind all of this stuff. And that's what we're after. That's what we want to know about. If you take a few moments to observe the living things growing around your house, you'll see divine intelligence in action. If God guides a single blade of grass to grow successfully, think how much more the divine wisdom of God is guiding you. And I think that's it's a very simple idea, but it's well worth just reminding ourselves of. Just go out and take a few moments to just look at the stuff growing. There's a divine intelligence behind all of that. And it's, how can you tell? You can just look at a leaf and you can see the symmetry of it. You can see, we can't invent something that works that well. We don't know how to duplicate that whole process. But there's obviously an intelligence in it. It knows how to draw all the nutrients it needs from the soil. It knows how to draw it from the sun, from the air, from the rain that comes. There's an obvious intelligence. But then there's my problem, and that intelligence seems to evaporate. It's like it can run a weed, but why is it not working so well in my life right now? It's because I'm thinking of it in a different way. It's easy to look at nature and say, well, it works for nature. That's how it works. And that weed doesn't need to figure out how to pay its bills. Actually, it does. But it's so in tune with how to do that that it doesn't even think about it. And that's a big assumption because I don't know how weeds actually think. But that was a lesson that a man like Jesus taught. He drew from nature to say, there's this infinite wisdom that knows how to run these things, these simple things, these blades of grass and all the things we see. But divine intelligence represents divine order. It expresses through us as order. Divine intelligence expresses through our life in orderly fashion. Jesus pointed out the earth produces of itself first the blade, then the ear, then the full grain in the ear. When we pray for the resolution of some issue, the temptation is to focus only on the full grain. We forget the blade comes first. And I think that's what I find with myself. I'm looking to resolve something in my life, and I'm thinking of that thing. I'm thinking about what that should look like once it's resolved. So I don't know the steps between where I am standing now and the resolution to that. So I have kind of a tunnel vision. And what that does, it creates a kind of bias, an expectation. Here's how it should look, so here's how it should unfold. And that's not necessarily true. And that's probably no truer than when we think we know how to run somebody else's life better than they do. It's like we see their problems and we know what they ought to do, but we don't know the makeup of their own consciousness, how they perceive things, and where they're coming from. And so it's a real challenge sometimes to let them go and let them figure it out themselves. But the point is that infinite intelligence, it does know how to bring about a resolution to whatever problem we have. And it's doing that the very moment we begin to see it, to see that there's a problem in the first place. I think it's Isaiah or one of the Old Testament prophets says, "Before they call, I will answer." And I've always liked that. I like it so much I can't remember who said it. But you don't have to remember who said it to like what it says. Before they call, I will answer. That's divine intelligence. That's divine wisdom. To think that way. Even before I knew I had the problem, the answer was there. So when I see the problem, when I see the thing that needs to be worked out, can I also see that somehow that answer is unfolding as well? Somehow it's working out. Of course, we do not know what our blade and ear are supposed to look like, so this may not be so helpful. However, our work is to state our desire and trust the wisdom of God to unfold the solution. That's the challenge, I guess, that we have, is to say, I've got this issue that needs to be resolved. I'd like it resolved, and sooner the better. I don't know how many times I have done that with the sale of our property and all that. It's just kind of a challenging thing to stay in the now, to stay here. But there's times when we do need to take action. When I was looking at watching the grass grow, and the weeds, I should say, grow in the front yard, I was thinking, I wonder if our yard guy is on summer vacation. And I kept thinking about that, and I kept trying to rationalize that. He probably is. But then I thought, well, I think he's more conscientious than that, so I decided to contact him and ask him if he's on summer vacation. He said, no, you told me not to come back. So that action was helpful. There's times that we act. There's times when we do things. And I think it's important to kind of do that. We also want to refrain from thinking of this process as God dealing us a hand of cards. Now we must figure out how to play them. It is more effective to simply check to see if there's some action we can take now, which is what I did. If so, we do that. If not, we commit to trusting that divine order is always in play. We allow ourselves to relax and go with the flow. So it's not to say we don't act. It's not to say we don't do something, because sometimes we do. And sometimes the thing that we do is just we're going on a hunch. We don't know. It's not clear cut. But if there's something we feel we need to do, we're the ones that this divine intelligence is expressing through. And our life is very unique to each one of us, the way we express our life. It's our fingerprint. And so it is our action, it is our thinking, it is our emotion, it's our intuition that puts the special look on our life and on the relationships that we're in. If you take a person, you have a relationship with that person, and you know someone else that has a relationship with that person, chances are very good your relationship and their relationship with that same person are going to be very different. And why is that? It's because we're all different. We have different ways of relating to people. It's the same person, but it's two different people to each of us. I have a view of that person, you have a view of that person. So that's what we keep in mind. How do we manage all of that? We don't. We don't have to. We only manage what's going on in our own consciousness, what's going on in our own life. But it isn't like God is just dealing out the cards and we go with the luck of the draw. We do make choices. We take action. And our life as it is basically the result of that. Emerson pointed that out a long time ago. He said, every man is an inlet and may become an outlet to everything there is in God. That's why it is beneficial for us to say things like infinite wisdom. The wisdom of God is now working through me in this particular situation. And when we say that, then what do we do next? If there's nothing we can do, if there's no action that we see that we can take, do we sit there and just keep affirming that and get worried about it? The more we talk about it to ourselves, the more fear we experience. We can do that. We've probably all done it. But the whole idea is to recognize this intelligence, this wisdom of God is a living thing. It's active in us now. It's operating this very moment. And so what should that do? What should the natural effect of that be? It should be peace of mind. We should be able to let go of the struggle that we're having trying to work this thing out and go with the flow, as we say. See yourself immersed in the intelligence of God with this divine wisdom expressing through you in the best and highest ways imaginable. If frustration begins to creep in, remind yourself with affirmative statements that divine order is always at work, unfolding your solution one step at a time. You know the resolution will come. It always has. Take the steps you need to take. Trust the divine order of the process and do your best to enjoy your life right now. And again, I think that was the whole point of Jesus' ministry, was to help people enjoy their life as it is right now, as it was right then. To enjoy the life that they have that's given to them. You and I are on this planet. It's our life. It's our relationships. What do we do with it? Do we worry ourselves through it? Or do we learn to trust the wisdom of God, the intelligence of God? And that's what we want to do. Thank you for watching this week's program. If you enjoyed this video, please share it with others. We want to reach as many people as we can, and we appreciate your help. If you'd like to help support this ministry, just click the donate card at the top right-hand corner of your screen. Your financial support means a lot to us. We have many subjects in our video lineup, so feel free to take a look. If there's a topic you don't see and would like me to address, just put it in the comment section. I'd love to know what's on your mind. To subscribe to this channel, simply click our logo. Thanks again for your interest in Independent Unity, and have a wonderful week.